deal, and I've heard almost nothing about it. So I know the hearing is closing right now, but I think we should just get a comment on the record that I feel like the testimony about the buildings themselves and how they interact with the neighborhood, the environment, the surrounding area, the town of Milton itself, particularly given the significance of this development, it has just been lacking, and I think that's unfortunate. I think Alex, and thank you, Selectwoman, for bringing that to our attention tonight. I don't know what to do about that, but I just want to note that for the record.
Sure. Early on in this process, that was what the purpose of the first meeting was the applicant had given a general overview of the project and showed some architectural renditions of what the buildings will look like, what it would look like with vehicles in the parking lot and residents walking around on the site, that sort of thing. And then quickly, we got sidetracked with, all these other numerous issues that got raised. And throughout the process, the concerns you just raised now haven't been raised, so we haven't felt the need to respond to any of that.
Yeah, well, okay, fair enough, but I don't believe we were sidetracked. I
meant
sorry,
from, I meant from those concerns.
Just a sec. We're not being sidetracked. These are public safety issues that have dominated this hearing at the expense of other issues that are not the kinds of issues that would put people's life in danger, but are nevertheless important, and that's my only point. But I don't think it's a sidetracked issue, Alan, that's all.
Okay.
Particularly, we've had hearings in this boardroom about the 35 feet in a Residence A that have lasted for 2 hours. We haven't talked about the height of this building. And I'm not sure I could tell you what the height is. I'm going to need to find out with the revised application, and I will. But we haven't taken any testimony on what that means, particularly as the site goes up 50 feet for its limited width. This is a steep site, and I know that most of the massing is up at the top, but it's going to feel very high once that building gets built. And I think that's part of why you're seeing the abutters, each of the direct abutters there, because they're going to see it as well. And we just haven't focused on that as much as I would have liked, that's all. Time did not permit it, and I just note that for the record.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Caggiano, have you... Well, Mr. Mullins is raising his hand here, and I think wants to be briefly heard, but...
Briefly.
Do you mind? Well,
No,
Mr. Mullins, come on up and we'll hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Mullins, 300 Highland Street. I just wanted to comment something Mr. Caggiano just said. He indicated that there was a willingness for the developer and that team to compromise and maybe reduce the density. We did meet recently, and Joe Lombardi, Mr. Carlin, myself, and these gentlemen met, but there was no agreement whatsoever to drop density at all. You indicated that we met. I suggested that you consider reducing the density and changing the design, and there was no willingness to do it. I just don't want to let that hang there, that there's any agreement whatsoever to reduce the density. Was a suggestion by Mr. Holland that he might consider dropping one floor, maybe putting in some additional shrubbery, something like that, but no agreement whatsoever of substantial change in the site plan. I just didn't want to let that hang.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mullins. Mr. Caggiano, have you...
I would not disagree with that. That's
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
All right. So other than Ms. O'Donnell's letter, which we can take when she gets it, dealing with that one issue on the school buses and the children who have special needs, are we in agreement that we're going to close the evidence portion of this hearing? So a yes from Mr. Mullen and a yes from...
Yes.
Yeah. And I agree with my colleagues. I think that you have to recognize here that if some compromise was forthcoming, it would be delightful, but the applicant's got the perfect right to propose this project and have it voted on as he proposes it, good, bad, or evil. And it's our decision. It's the board's decision to call the shots on that. So I certainly, I would love to see some type of an agreement. When I read some of the cases and I look at some of the literature, you kind of see an intent that parties should be discussing things and coming to agreements, but if you can't do it, you can't do it. I'm not going to hold it against the applicant because he thinks he's proposed a project that meets the applicable laws, and this is the project that he wants. He's got a right to have an up and down vote on that, and you're going to get it. So with that having been said, we're going to close the evidence portion of this hearing. It's a very significant event because what it does is it triggers the clock. It's my understanding, and Alan, well, you can correct me if you're wrong, because you're an expert here, and we're not, that once we close the evidence portion of the hearing, we have 40 days within which to contemplate and discuss the proposed decision. And once we formulate a decision, and from that date, we have 14 days to prepare a written decision and have it filed. Are you in agreement with that?
I believe it's 40 days is the correct timeline, and I think 14 is accurate as well. I'd have to check
Right.
the statute on that. Although I would suggest that the hearing, the 180-day period for the hearing closes on Friday.
Friday the
Yeah,
19th.
not today. And there were multiple submissions made today.
There were.
Both from Kathleen O'Donnell and Johanna Schneider, among others. We would like to keep open the evidentiary part of the hearing so that we could address some of those items, specifically some of the items in Ms. O'Donnell's letter that was sent today. We'd like to let the board know where we stand on a variety of those issues, many of which were raised newly in her letter, and at least let the board know, what those concessions that we are willing to make. There are a number in there. There are a number of conditions in there that would be acceptable to the applicant, and I would just think the board would want to have that information in making its decision.
And when do you propose doing that?
We would have that letter in before the end
Before
of the
the
day on
19th.
Friday, on the 19th.
Want to be heard on Mr. Caggiano's request?
I don't know if they can open meeting
We
issue.
close at 1:30 on Friday, town hall.
We'll be open.
That's all right.
I'll have it before 1:30. I don't know if I'll be able to deliver hard copies by 1:30, but I'll certainly get it to you by email.
What's up to them, I just want to let
Sure.
that be known.
I don't think
Make it
so.
available to the public.
Yeah, I don't think that's, Mrs. King, what do you have to say?
website on this?
I think there is, isn't there?
What?
Yeah.
Is there the
We're just talking about public notice on.
Oh,
the town website has this as an agenda item, and
Yeah.
it's,
oh, yeah.
No, I mean the
No.
materials, are they available?
Bill, is all the material updated on the website?
Not all of the latest stuff, there's just too much of it to date, but we'll
But
get the
before that,
rest
yes.
tomorrow.
Well, here's what I would say on that, I think that's reasonable, but given the fact that the hearing will also close, then we won't have the opportunity to hear, John's been very good about rebuttal on rebuttal, and I would ask that Mary make that available to the public as soon as possible. And then the issue would be whether or not the public wanted to comment on it, but I don't know that that's necessary. You just want to have them be able to see it, because we are going to deliberate in open session at some point in the near future, that's all.
Right.
That's my own.
my thought is, rather than, and I can't say that this is a considered thought, but rather than
That's probably true.
having another round of back and forth on issues which have been discussed for far too long, in my view. I would think that what we'd want Mr. Caggiano to do is to submit a letter, or whatever form you want, indicating which conditions set forth in Ms. O'Donnell's submittal, or even the submittal of Ms. Schneider, that you are in agreement with. and not get involved in analyzing each of the conditions or parsing words or anything. But if you agree with 1, 5, 8, or 10 of Ms. O'Donnell's proposed conditions, just send us a letter and we'll have that as part of the record. And likewise, if you want to address Ms. Schneider's conditions, that you agree with them. But we don't want to get into a debate as to the condition says this and we believe that, and because
Yeah, I
otherwise the hearing's never going to end.
Well, the other thing is that that doesn't need to be part of a public hearing. I mean, it's typical to close the public hearing and have discussion about what kinds of conditions, or the wording of conditions, what kind of decision is going to be made as the board deliberates. So you don't need to keep the public hearing open for that. The public hearing is for, evidence, and discussion about conditions and how the eventual permit should be worded is something that always happens in that 40-day period. So I don't think that we need to keep the public hearing open.
Well, I think
Well, I would agree with that, except that, we received some material information today, including this letter from the fire department that I received as I walked into the room this evening. I would like an opportunity to review these and to provide some sort of response to the extent that we think that's necessary. And we thought while we did that, we would also address your list of conditions. And I don't think you're right, Mr. Leonard, we've discussed at great length the vast majority of the conditions in Kathleen's letter, so there's not a whole lot more to be said. I think for a lot of that, most of what we'll say is, please see, section X of this submission, just to point you in the right direction. And then on the ones that are
that'd be
accepted.
helpful. There are so many submissions here, to be frank. I've got 2 file drawers
A
of
roadmap would
materials
be
here.
really nice.
Right.
I'm not sure I have the entire record in my office. If I do, it's all over the place.
Sure. And then at the same time, to just explain which of those conditions would be acceptable. That's all.
Okay, that sounds fair. I agree with that, and I certainly agree, particularly with respect to the fire chief. You certainly should have the right to comment on the chief's supplemental memo. And that would be filed then before 1 o'clock?
Yeah, I can submit them by email by
That's
closing at 1:30, but I couldn't have copies hand-delivered.
Well, that's all right. As long as they're submitted to Mary, Mary's leaving a little bit early on Friday, but if you also copy in the board,
Sure.
and you have our addresses, so we'll make sure that, and copy in Miss O'Donnell, obviously, and copy in Miss Schneider, I believe, who sometimes is not copied in on these things. And Mr. Clark as well, so he has it. That would be very helpful, and we'll just
Or
mirror
you can just send it to me and I'll send it to those other folks.
whatever you prefer.
Whatever's easiest for him. I don't need to.
I'll send it to that group.
Comprehensive
Okay, that's
list.
great. So that's fine. So the hearing is going to, the evidence is going to close on this Friday, the 19th. We're going to use as the magic date. It would say at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. How's that? Now, let me talk with my colleagues here about setting up a meeting in order to discuss the application. Do you have any thoughts on that, Mr. Mullen and Mrs. Donahue King?
It's been a few times. Do you want me to push or?
Let me tell you what my thoughts are preliminarily. That we should pick a date that is sufficiently down the road to allow us to review the materials and to contemplate the materials and do any research we need to do. But we don't want to go out so far that we get close to the deadline date. So my thought was that if we
July 29th.
meet during the week of July 6th, after the 4th of July holiday, that would give us 10 days, 12 days, something like that. And it would still give us plenty of time, because I would have the magic decision date,
29th.
it would be the 29th.
Liberation date, 29th.
Yeah. So how does that work?
Decision date would be the 12th, I think.
I'm sorry?
No, it's 40
No,
days.
40
for-
days.
40 days for the,
40 days for the deliberation.
and then,
Deliberation.
then 14 days after to file the decision with the
Right.
clerk.
12th of what?
August.
12th of August.
Okay. I think that's right.
But you have to make the decision by July 29th. File it. Yeah.
So if we meet during that week of July 6th, that'd give us time to have an additional hearing or two if we actually needed it. Does that make any sense to everyone?
We already have a hearing the 8th.
We'll get somebody else.
Oh, for you?
Yeah, we'll get some other board members.
Oh, you're all just gonna-
I have a lot of flexibility that first week, like the 7th, the 8th. I can't do it the 9th.
The 7th is the best for me.
Is that too soon? Okay, can you do the 8th?
Sorry.
How about the 8th for you, Ginny? Wednesday.
Yeah.
Is the 6th possible?
The 6th is Monday, it's right after the 4th of July weekend. I'm traveling that weekend, so I couldn't do the 6th. I'm going as far away from this hearing place as I can, and for as long as I can.
How about the Wednesday the 1st? Would that be too close?
That's too much before Independence Day. I don't like it, but you could move to the 14th or 15th.
Yeah, 14th's worked for me.
How's the 14th, Jim?
14th is not good.
How about the 15th?
That would be better.
I can do the 15th. How about you, Mr. Mullen? You can't do the 15th?
Sorry.
Five o'clock.
Could do the 13th.
I can do the 13th. The Mondays are tough. But
Can you do the 13th?
how's the 13th, Mr. Caggiano? I know you're going to be just sitting there, but we want to make sure you can attend. Mr. O'Donnell?
Yeah, that's fine.
What are you going for July 4th?
Why can't you make it on the 13th and the 14th? I'm going to Wollaston Beach. That's where I'm going to go. With all due respect to the people, the wonderful people of Quincy.
Yeah.
Monday, the 13th.
7 and 7:30.
Yeah, that works.
How about 7 o'clock? Maybe we can finish a little bit early. I don't know. Okay. So we're going to adjourn the hearing until
In this week.
July 13th. That's a Monday,
In this room.
7 o'clock at Blute. Thanks for everybody's cooperation, and thank you, members of the public, for attending. If you want to come back, the 13th, 7 o'clock at the Blute Conference Room.
Do you want me to do what I did